This morning's conversation could not be more timely and more important as we really link the importance of digital innovation and technology to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think all of us, following the 10th Concordia Annual Summit in September, what is happening around the world with the COVID-19 pandemic, among many other major events happening around the world, this is a time to redouble our efforts in focusing on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and technology and innovation play such a critical role in that process. Our 10th anniversary summit brought together leaders like Boutheina and Robert, who's joined on this call as well as representatives from groups like Google, Microsoft, and World Food Program to discuss tech-based solutions to global challenges. A clear takeaway from the 2020 annual summit is the importance of technology to the global economy, to health and social recovery following COVID-19. And we saw that as a dominant theme in all of the different programming sets that took place during that week-long summit. Just yesterday, we released the official 2020 Concordia Annual Summit report, and I strongly encourage everybody to visit our website to review that report. We hosted some incredibly important sessions, and while I, for one, cannot wait to get back to being together in person, yes, even in New York during the craziness of the UN General Assembly and traffic, I have to say the digital transformation has enabled Concordia to be that much more inclusive, to bring so many new voices to the table, and I was so very, very pleased with the outcome of that. The report itself is going to present, or does present, a number of takeaways and calls to action, which we as Concordia and as an institution will be using our programming to continue to advance. On November 16th and 17th, we'll be hosting the 2020 Concordia Africa Initiative, and on December 3rd, we're going to be hosting the 5th Concordia America Summit. In the spirit of today's conversation, I'm very, very excited to say that digital is going to be the way that we will reach all of you as we host these different summits. And against that backdrop, it's a sincere pleasure to partner with KPMG, amazing company on this subject, and to bring you all together to explore more explicitly the opportunities that development finance institutions and the private sector can do to unlock and advance issues through partnerships. And so all very, very much within the theme of Concordia, within the theme of our founding and why we are all here today. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce as our moderator this morning, Laura Frigenti. She serves as the Global Head, International Development Assistance Services Institute at KPMG. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And please, Laura, take it away.
Thank you so much. I mean, I also want to start, first of all, with thanking Matt and Hanne that have been so helpful in putting together in record time such a prestigious panel of colleagues to talk about this table, and then all of you for really being able to mobilize again with such a short notice. And I guess that probably a little bit is because of the power of Concordia, the convening power of Concordia, but a lot of that is also because this is a topic that must have been front and center, in our minds ever since this pandemic started. And so let me just maybe start with saying why is that we wanted to have this, this conversation, and what is the spirit for us at KPMG. I think that everything actually started at the very beginning of the pandemic. We started having a set of calls that we organize among the different geographies and different sectors of our very large and diverse firm. And that was basically to take stock of how was the pandemic changing their business, what kind of requests they were receiving from governments, institutions, companies in the markets in which they were operating. And I think that as we were putting together responses coming from countries as diverse as United States, United Kingdom, Israel, Sweden, but also a lot of the emerging markets like Ivory Coast and Kenya and India, et cetera, we really noted that the single theme that was going across all these activities was the theme of technology. So all the solutions that different clients were asking us to provide were technology-based solutions. And then as we started going a little bit more in depth and try to systematize our learning around this, we realized that many of them were actually operating in two traditional areas where someone like me, who's an old end, for global development, has really been struggling for decades. One was service delivery, how to make it possible to continue to deliver the same access and the same quality of services under completely different circumstances. And the other one was logistics, the whole issue of distribution that started with PPE and then has been going on, with preparing for potentially, vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. So we really thought that this, in a way, as much as the moment and the occasion obviously wasn't a happy one, but in a way that there were a lot of interesting and important innovation that were coming up, and that it would be good for us, being a firm that is so much at the hinge between public and private. We work so much with government, we work with so many public institutions, but we also work with a lot of private sectors that have been affected in their value chain, in their delivery system, et cetera, to try to see whether we can take stock of what this, big wealth of innovation is telling us, and whether actually we can really use this unfortunate moment in history to actually make it transformative and see how we can find a way of putting together different solutions, more effective, more efficient, probably less expensive than the traditional solution for development that we have been talking about or thinking about or operating with. And so with that in mind, we thought that for us to be able to kickstart our thinking around how to go about it, it would be really helpful to, first of all, hear from a broad range of people that are, probably struggling with the same issues or moving within the same, the same environment. And so we asked Concordia, to help us put together this little conversation, which, as I said, is really for us an opportunity to hear. It's an input to our thinking as a firm, but I also hope that it's going to be, the beginning of a table of willing or believers that really think that by sharing experience, we can really move the needle, in the right direction on so many global development issues that are so very dear to many of us. So with that background in mind, let me start, with asking an initial question, which is, you all have seen how, during this pandemic, technology has really changed the way in which you do so many things. Even in our small daily lives, we have seen an enormous amount of changes. Can we start with bringing to this virtual table some concrete examples of how you have seen technology really bring change and innovation to business models that you were adopting before? And maybe, I hate when someone calls on me, so you will hate me if I call on some of you, but let me just ask, for example, maybe, what about WFP? Because I have still in mind, some work that KPMG and WFP did together, in the refugee camps in Jordan that really attracted my attention years ago. And you guys are so much at the forefront of innovation. So why don't we start, with WFP to hear a little bit some concrete examples?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for giving me the word, Laura. Like it's World Food Program, you may know. Like, so we are this year trying to reach 138 million people in 88 countries. This number has actually gone up because of COVID-19 and the socioeconomic factors that will push more and more people into hunger, unfortunately. And so really one of the questions for us is always like on the emergency side, how can we be more effective in terms of aid delivery, determining where are the most people, the people who need our assistance, assistance, how to best deliver it, and how to ensure that it actually is delivered to them. So on the front end, there's definitely an area where, for instance, the area of like robocalls, mobile phone service, and overlays of like, you know, data analytics. So people can even look at that online. There's a website, hungermap.wfp.org, that's actually like also showing predictive models and overlays in real time, how hunger is evolving, so to determine where hunger is. And we've been using all sorts of different aspects, like artificial intelligence, for instance, after the Beirut blast, to determine where are buildings still intact, where are hungry people, so where do we need to position the food. So like this is something that is definitely an area to look into. In terms of delivering assistance, COVID definitely has put a couple of like blockers into this, where social distancing in an environment like a refugee camp is hard. So we've been looking into multiple aspects, like low-tech solutions, like a food ATM. So it literally does what it says, is like, you know, a machine or a mini warehouse where you can actually just essentially access physical food, but also cash and voucher programs. So out of the $8 billion of our current budget, over $2.1 billion last year were already cash and voucher transfers of the World Food Program. And so this is definitely one of the aspects where digital in nature, this enablement is something that can bring higher efficiencies. More of the money can actually go to the people that it's intended for. And then let me just close with the last example. Like, let's just think about food waste and like food systems, how inefficient that is, and like how much food is lost. Like, depending on the estimates, you would say like a third or 40% of food is lost globally, which is estimated at about $1 trillion of overall value that gets lost. Just think about like the values, and we are experimenting with different aspects of, you know, farm to fork type of digital enablement of like blockchain marketplaces, but also private sector led consortia, like alliances that would, for instance, that can make people more effective, but also uses digital to enable those changes and make it more effective.
Thank you so much. I mean, WFP always at the forefront of innovation, and actually congratulations on the Nobel Prize, which was such a well-deserved recognition for the fantastic work you guys do. Can I ask you, Brigitte, because my heart is on education, which I think is really at the top of the priorities under normal circumstances, and particularly more so now in this difficult time. I understand that Google has been doing lots of work on remote piloting, remote learning, etc. Can you share with us some examples on that?
Sure, and thanks again for the organizers for pulling this together. It's great to see all of you. So yes, I mean, obviously, you know, with a billion students out of school over the course of this year, thinking about how we can best support them to continue their learning is critical and incredibly challenging. We know that we don't have the connectivity in place that's necessary. We don't have the devices in place that are necessary to do that. And actually, those are really hard problems that, you know, we at Google are not necessarily even equipped to solve. What we've really been leaning into as a result is thinking about how we can support organizations who are working already in communities, have the sort of educational resources and curriculum in place, and thinking about how we can continue to scale up what they're doing, you know, often orders of magnitude. So much of this work actually builds on investments we had made a number of years ago across emerging markets, thinking particularly about open educational resources and content that is aligned to, you know, sort of national curriculum and supported by teachers, and really how we might encourage more of that. So we've worked both in Brazil and in India with different organizations. In Brazil, working with Lemon Foundation and Nova Scola as partners to scale up thousands of new resources aligned at the time to Brazil's new national curriculum. Those resources have proven during this time to be critical, and they've actually been able to mobilize more resources to actually even scale those out further. And these are the types of things that, you know, I have kids, I'm sure many of you do too, you know, these are the types of things that we really want to see on our kids' devices in school, not something that feels like it was randomly found maybe that morning, but really aligned with like, this is how we're teaching math in second grade in order to actually see that kind of result. So that's been critical. And I think there's more of that we need, and we need more of it in like local languages, particularly, you know, when you think about a country like India, we'd supported a set of 100 creators to actually create new video content, not just dubbed or subtitled content, which is often the case, but really native to the languages that they were working in. So again, those have been, I think, critical needs. But we are just, I think, collectively scratching the surface. And I think one of our hopes is that, you know, with tools like ours and other tech companies, we have Google Classroom and all of these different tools and services, that we're able to actually have those platforms be new opportunities for learning, even when we go back to whatever our new form of education will look like in the years and in months to come.
Thank you so much. Anybody else wants to share some concrete examples of, go ahead. Robert, let's start with you.
Thanks, Laura, and it's great to be here. So thank you, Matt, for the invitation. You know, UNDP is really in the business of helping governments as they sort through some of these digital challenges. So when COVID happened, we saw really the emergence of a few themes overall. You mentioned a couple already, Laura, the service delivery and things like that. When I kind of look at our response, I categorize it into 3 levels. At a very basic level, there was a response where governments were really looking to figure out how to continue doing that service delivery remotely. So there was a combination of, you know, civil servants who needed to be connected and learn how to work virtually. And there were everything from getting laptops to employees to having the kinds of agreements on what it means to actually work remotely for governments that hadn't done that before. We saw a number of requests in that area. And then if you kind of go up a level from that, there were the digital tools and solutions that we see. And that was really across kind of putting government online. So a lot of work around not just telemedicine, where like in Bangladesh, they put 4,000 doctors into a telemedicine system and, you know, have been processing, you know, 400,000 cases, to things like e-commerce platforms that were put in place to try to support informal sector participants who were put essentially out of work because they're not able to come face-to-face contact with their customers. So in Uganda, we had partnering with a local e-commerce company called Jamia. We put 2,000 farmers on this e-commerce platform so that they could continue that business. And then at the sort of overall level, we saw this increase in intention overall toward digital transformation, digital strategy. So if governments were not thinking about digital strategy seriously before, they certainly are now. And so we see a number of requests for support at that. What does that digital transformation strategy look like overall? What are the policy frameworks that we need for using new technologies? So as contact tracing platforms are offered to governments, how do they deal with data privacy? How do they deal with usability, accessibility, and so on? Across the board. So we saw this incredible range. Within UNDP alone, we are tracking 223 of these examples. And that's just in UNDP interventions. That doesn't include what governments are doing on their own or with other partners. So it's truly kind of I would say COVID has really released that kind of acceleration around digital. And we're just seeing an explosion in that area.
Thank you so much. I'll take Henri on this, and then I want to ask a question I want to move to another topic. Go ahead.
So very quickly, thank you, Laura. I wanted to take 2 examples from 2 groups who have proved to be particularly vulnerable to the impact of COVID-19. So migrants and also MSMEs. So on migrants, you know, what we have seen is, as we all know, a decrease in the formal remittance globally, but also a surge in the adoption of digital remittance solutions. And I think that has been seen as a survival mechanism for a lot of MTOs, especially the smaller one. So we have been trying to see how we can leverage the formalization of remittances through digital channel with access to other services, including loans. And we have, for example, tested on the corridor between EAU and Nepal, a partnership between the Al Fardan Exchange in the UAE and the Lakshmi Bank in Nepal to securitize remittance flow and look at the credit, at the history provided by the data on the remittance flows to basically provide collateral loans to migrants and their families back home. So I think there has a whole potential to leverage digital remittances to kind of expand the range of services, including loans to this population. And on the MSME, the only thing I wanted to say, and going back to the survey that also we did with you, Concordia and ICC, what we realize is there is kind of three pillars that we have tried to address in our COVID-19 response. First, to leverage digital to provide MSME an identity, to make them visible so that they can support, they can get emergency support, but also longer term kind of access to finance and services. So the kind of visibility aspect that digital enables. The second one is alternative funding scenarios. We have been working with fintech companies, for example, in Indonesia and other countries in Southeast Asia, to enable them access to finance that commercial bank will never provide. And they can do that because they are leveraging digital data again through their algorithm to kind of provide credit profile and provide finance. And the last one is a kind of business improvement and sometimes transformation enabled by digital in terms of integration in supply chain, better efficiency, access to customer. And we see these three pillars as the kind of, mutually reinforcing approach to really kind of help MSME to recover from the COVID-19 and hopefully to kind of grow. So both on the resilience and the recovery and growth side. So and we have a number of examples on that I would be happy to share, but thank you very much.
Thank you so much. As much as I am excited really with, all these examples and all this potential, I am also somehow concerned because in a way, all this innovation is only possible if there is an infrastructure that allows for this innovation, to be delivered. And so, for example, one of the big topics that was discussed recently at the World Economic Forum around UNGA was exactly this digital divide. I know that the World Bank has been talking very, boldly and has taken lots of great initiatives around that, and so have other multilateral banks. Can I ask you, Boutheina, how do you see the situation evolving on that? Are we really going to be able to fill this gap on the digital divide, or are we going to have yet again a kind of a world that moves on two separate speeds, one that goes very fast and the other one that somehow is struggling behind? How do you see that?
Thank you, Laura. I think, one of the things that COVID really helped us is to think about digital like not an afterthought. So the discussion around digital moved from the question of why this is important to how can we leverage it in coping with the pandemic, but also in thinking about the recovery. So very happy to hear the examples from other colleagues, which is very aligned with the way the bank is thinking. But it also brought to the fore, like no other time before, the issues around the digital divide. And we're seeing it not only as a divide between countries, but also within countries. So we've seen countries with very high penetration rates come and say very loud that the kids in that particular village or that particular area are not having the same opportunities as the kids in towns. So it really brought the discussion around the digital divide to a next level of discussion. And so it's the digital divide in general. There is also the angle that I really want to talk about every time I have the opportunity, is the fact that the digital divide or the whole COVID experience was not gender neutral. So the issues around the gender digital divide, I think, were brought to the attention even, higher than before. So what we're doing in the bank is trying to think on an approach that brings many people around the table. So clearly what the world has done to connect the first 50% to the internet is a great story, and we're all celebrating that this year 50% of people are connected to the internet. But what needs to happen with the remaining 50% in a context where it's a huge economic and social losses that COVID is putting on us. It's decades of eradication of the human capital gains that were going to happen because of COVID. It's putting 150 million back into extreme poverty. So we need to tackle the digital divide, but we need to do it in a totally different manner than the approach that we've been using before. And that different manner requires that everybody is around the table It requires a stronger collaboration between the public and the private sector. And interestingly, with COVID, we've seen new rules of the game between public and private in terms of responding to the emergency. We've seen examples where, you know, zero rating being given, suspension of licensing being given, new spectrum being given. And, you know, what we used to hear, this is impossible, it takes a lot of time, there are regulatory hurdles. Overnight, the hurdles were addressed. So in a way, that shock in the system, I think, is providing positive way into how we think about the bridging the digital divide. And I feel if we lose this opportunity, we might lose it for a long time. So we're trying to get more discussion around how do we take advantage of how technology firms are doing. So for example, the balloons, and I mean, so much happening that is happening as good pilots here and there. How do we make sure that there is a good environment for these pilots to be more mainstream? How do we look at issues? And I think one of the colleagues mentioned it earlier, if people cannot avoid the device, no matter how much bandwidth they have access to, they will not be using it. So this ecosystem approach that you know, force us into thinking about access that is affordable, available, and safe, because we also seen with COVID that cybersecurity also took to the next level. So how do we bring the discussion around new business models, around a revived approach of collaboration between public and private, and around the idea that all hands on deck. So, and we're very excited to see and hear the same message coming from governments, from the private sectors, from bilateral donors, from, I think what really the crisis, if there is a silver lining, I think it's around the digital agenda, and we need to take it into consideration as we build back better.
Thank you so much. Sylvestre, may I ask you to comment on this, because Bayer is a gigantic corporation with ramification in so many different sectors, but also has a very ambitious development goal that he's trying to, you know, to support and to sustain. So how do you see this digital divide impacting on the people that you want to reach, which are mainly those in remote areas, these small farmers, etc., etc.?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Laura. And I'm going to echo what we already heard from Bernhard with the World Food Programme and with Boutheina with the World Bank. And I'm going to give you two examples. You know, at Bayer, we stand for health for all, hunger for none. And I'm going to give an example in digital agriculture. And with today digital solutions, we can move from an input-based to an output-based farming. What it means today in most countries, we are selling input like fertilizers, seeds. And when I say we, I say the crop industry, servicing farmers. We are selling input to help them to farm. And with digitalization, we can move from input to output, where we can predict the yield, the volume that a piece of land is going to produce, and by when. So those are incredibly valuable information for farmers. You remember, farming is a very risky business, and we have models today through digital farming helping the farmers to predict exactly what they are going to do with all the parameters, starting with the soil, the water, the irrigation, the variety selection, the pesticides that they're going to apply, and so on and so on. So all those digital tools now exist in one toolbox, and we're able to roll out this technology. And it's not only for the modern world. In Africa, for instance, we're going to pilot that with drones. Drones technology are now widely spread in Africa, and not only for imagery or mapping, but also to help farmers, to help the smaller the farmers, down to 100 square meters, to help them to predict the output of what they're doing. So this is a breakthrough technology that we want to pilot in Africa. And you mentioned before ecosystem. Of course, we're not going to do that alone. We are only one piece of the equations, and we want to build a sustainable ecosystem around this with various partners, EFI, because we need to also help farmers to access credit to start farming. So that's really one very exciting example around the digital farming for emerging countries. The second one, which is already concrete, is linked to our public health initiative around malaria control and malaria prevention in endemic areas. And today, digitalization, mapping, GIS, data recording allow us, and when I say us, is again various players in malaria prevention, starting with the donors, optimizing the funding against malaria. And this is amazing how you can make those malaria programs much more efficient just by using data which were available before, but not captured because of the lack of digital technology. So those are two examples where at Bayer we really embrace, of course, digitalization and transformation to reach our 2030 goals. Again, we want to empower 100 million smallholder farmers across the globe, support women to access family planning, and empower also people to access daily nutrition. And last but not least, carbon neutral. That's another example where digitalization is going to play an important role. We want to help farmers to monetize their credit, their carbon credit. This is an incredible source of new revenue for farmers. So plenty of examples, but again, we need to build an ecosystem around this solution, because we are not going to achieve that alone.
Thank you so much. I mean, that was very interesting. John, can I ask you to comment on this? Because obviously the DFC sits really at the hinge of public and private, more than many other organizations. Can you comment on this? How do you see the future of public-private partnership around technology? And what do you see as the key challenges? I don't know if you're mute. Maybe mute.
I think still on mute.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, part of it is at a government agency, they don't allow us to use Zoom. So there was a technical fix where I'm using my phone and my computer at the same time. So I apologize on that. And it looks like you guys are now seeing my phone pop up. But with that being said, excited to be here. Excited to be at the DFC and participate as a representative in this forum. I recently, and the question is timely, I recently joined the public side after having a career on the private side in an investing role, and also in a technology operating role. I most recently came from San Francisco working for a VC-backed financial technology company. So have had a great experience in the first few months here joining the DFC, exploring the opportunities for public and private partnership to be more efficient. I think within technology, where there is huge opportunity is for businesses that are interested in being funded, or businesses that are interested in acquiring assets abroad to enable and further technology and innovation. There's many domestically based businesses here that don't necessarily think about exploring abroad, where they can make a significant development impact, and really partnering together to enable these businesses to explore opportunities internationally. If you look at recent transactions like Stripe's announcement earlier to fund Paystack, which is a payments company based in Nigeria, right? To Robert's comments on e-commerce and logistics, this critical infrastructure and financial technology is going to be key to underpinning growth and ability to access and break down this digital divide. So it's opportunities like that where public and private partnership can come into play to really spur innovation in various sectors in the emerging technology space, and to bring some of these companies, and I know that we have Microsoft and some of the others on the line, work together to explore this space. So appreciate that, and open to continuing the conversation in that regard.
Thank you so much. I want to ask the same question to Irene, with the awareness of the fact that she actually operates in a market that I am particularly interested in, which is like not the giant, not the Bayer of this world, is those that actually create the backbone of the economies. So how do you see the issue of innovation, transformative innovation for the type of clients that you have in IDB Lab.
Thank you, Laura. And yes, I think after 20 years at IFC with mainly the mainstream finance and business corporate side, having spent the last almost 3 at the IDB, focused on the innovation lab side of the IDB group, which targeted startups and early stage investing opportunities. I'm as passionate as you about the opportunities that lie within the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And let me share with you a moonshot and then a thought also on the public-private partnership side. The moonshot is, why not in a region like Latin America and the Caribbean, which has seen an explosion of new ideas and entrepreneurs and an emergence as in other regions of the digital urgency, venture capital industry of $100 billion in a few years. We are today at $4.5 billion, and that's not even the same level as Israel for a region of 650 million people. It is possible, and why not that distributed across many more sectors? Today, it's concentrated basically in software as a service, fintech, marketplaces. Why not in health in particular? And I'll give an example of that. We've seen a Timpel, for example, a precision ventilator company in Brazil, totally, grow much faster during these last few months since it was sitting right at the center of the health emergency, and the demand for their devices has been growing. And for the first time, it started really partnering much more with the public health system. But there, of course, I think, and that's the reflection on partnerships and the private-public side, apart from the requirement on connectivity and access to digital tools and infrastructure, which is critical, there is also establishing much better channels for the public and private to partner. So in the same country in Brazil, in parallel, we put together a program with Hospitales das Clínicas in Sao Paulo, the largest public hospital in Sao Paulo, to establish clear methodologies so that they could partner with this kind of startup. And there is the ethical side that I think, Robert, you brought up. So how to treat data, especially in sectors with such sensitive data as health. So I think the role of partners like the ones around the table today to come together, especially those of us who are in institutions, multilateral institutions that can play a fairly neutral and technology agnostic role, it's critical to give that sort of comfort and allow for this moonshot to happen, and for these new startups that are emerging to partner more effectively with the public sector to give a much more systemic response to the crisis. Thank you for the opportunity, Laura.
Thank you. So we have spent this time so far, thinking about what has happened in these months and the space and the scope for innovation. Now I want to ask everybody the same question, but thinking forward. So if you were to share with us what your 2 top priorities are to move this agenda forward, or the kind of things that you're planning to to focus the attention and the efforts of your organizations, of your company, and also the greatest challenge. We spoke a lot about, the digital divide, but there are others. There are regulations, there are investments, there is capacity, and so on and so forth. So give me a sense of what is on your to-do list, or what is on your top priorities area, and what do you see as the challenge? Can I start maybe with Brigitte? I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No, just always find the unmute button. Yeah, so at Google, we're excited about a lot of the areas that have been discussed here today, and it's been great to hear how many themes there are actually across, I think, all of the examples that were shared. I think one critical one is really thinking about predictive analytics, advanced analytics, AI and machine learning. which has been an area that we've been investing in over the past couple of years, in particular, thinking about not only, where can we advance those really promising use cases. A number of folks on this call already shared a few of those, but also what are those systemic barriers to doing this work responsibly in an ongoing and much more fluid manner. And one of those is for sure data, and thinking about how we can both encourage more publicly available, open, still privacy preserving data sets out there that can be interwoven to continue to build more models, but also the creation of new data sets that are specifically addressing some of the challenges that we know are most pressing. And we have, I think, a lot, we feel like we all still have a lot of data out there, and yet there are still these gaps. So what does it look like, for example, to really be thinking about data sets that are focused on the agriculture needs or language needs or education needs of a particular geography that we're currently don't have, that are currently missing from kind of the world of data sets that we know we need. So I think that's an area for us all to think about. I think government has a critical role to play there. We obviously need to think about what it means to get some of the responsibility aspects of that really right. But I also think it's an area where we often perhaps let kind of the perfect be the enemy of better, and just making sure that we're actually making progress in that vein, and would love to continue conversations with the folks here and otherwise in that direction. And I think the challenge that is really, you spoke a little bit about it, Irene, is just this: how do we connect these pieces to ensure that solutions that are maybe housed in an organization at WFP supporting through their accelerator, or someone we're funding, or a university, some of these young professors who are working on machine learning projects, how do we connect these pieces and really build the pipeline so that those technologies are actually deployed and used in the places that really can be most impactful, which is in government. It's with many of the agencies, sitting on the table, and there is a capacity gap to get there. There's sort of both an actual capacity implementation, which I think we can sometimes overcome, but also a literacy and understanding kind of how do we continue to use this moment. And I really agree that people have been forced to sort of address that gap in knowledge to some extent. Maybe they haven't fully, built the bridge to get to where they need to be in this moment where, digital and so much of our world is really looking very different. And so how do we take advantage of this time to build those bridges more quickly and actually get that pipeline in place to ensure that the technical advances, the technological changes that we're seeing transform, so much of our consumer lives, so much of our business world are really being used to address the challenging problems of our time.
Thank you. Maybe Robert, would you like to follow up on this?
Sure, very much agree with those that Brigitte mentioned. I would put them into sort of, if I can sneak three quick ones in. The first one would be around building the models around inclusive digital transformation and connectivity. So it's a little bit what Boutheina was talking about. We must think inclusive when we do this, because digital on its own is not neutral necessarily. When you put digital approaches into a society full of inequalities, you must think intentionally about how you're going to address the digital divide in an equal way, so you don't make those inequalities worse. Second one is around an issue that hasn't come up yet, but it's for us, it's a priority. It's around misinformation and disinformation, that is being essentially propagated at a faster rate by digital platforms, which can be quite destructive. So how do we really start to get that kind of safe space for and responsible internet usage around misinformation and privacy issues and so on. The third one quickly is around digital public goods, which is kind of what Brigitte was saying around data sets and things. How do we build a kind of global set of stronger digital public goods that can be used for and leveraged by whether you're a startup trying to commercialize something in a local ecosystem, or whether it's a global organization, you're able to draw on data resources or technology models, those kinds of things. I think we're looking at establishing, or I think we need to establish a kind of global layer of digital public goods.
Thank you so much. Henri, can I come to you?
No, thank you. I think, looking forward, what we see is the acceleration of development of digital economies. And I think the challenge for us is how to ensure they are inclusive, as Robert was just mentioning now. So, for us, it has been kind of looking at 4 pillars of intervention in our strategy, supporting essentially LDCs, which is where we work by our mandate. So really how to support policy and regulators to kind of adapt regulation and ease a path for the greater adoption of digital solution, but also looking at riding on stronger infrastructure. And this is where I agree that the digital public good are essential. How to kind of create open API applications so that you can have more innovation riding those rails. Finally, for me, it's also the, for UNCDF, is the kind of pushing this culture of innovation with the private sector that we talked a lot about, and how to create a space, a safe space to innovate, a space to interact with the regulator through sandboxes, for example, and really to kind of nudge the private sector to do more in terms of going into underserved areas and trying to do that in a way which bridges the digital divide. And then, really the kind of empowerment of people we are trying to serve in terms of digital literacy, digital capabilities. I think it's recognized that if we are not building that, it's really not going to have, these digital economies are going to be more, less inclusive as even they are now. And I think the kind of focus on digital capabilities and literacy is key. Finally, I would like to say, we are very keen to, I think we realize we need to equip government with tools to measure the degree of inclusiveness of the digital economies. And we have been working on more than UNCDF, but I mean, there are many initiatives likewise. So it's called Inclusive Digital Economy Scorecard, and we're testing that in different countries with partners. We try to equip government to really understand whether this trend is inclusive or increase exclusiveness. And the final thing I wanted to mention is, the Task Force on Digital Financing of the SDG just came back with a report, and it's open a whole range of possibilities to look at the financing of SDG leveraging digital. And with UNDP, we have developed a joint offer to really take that agenda forward and see how can we leverage digital to transform domestic resource mobilization and make microsavers investor in the long-term development of their countries. We're testing that in Bangladesh and in other countries. So I think these are very powerful instruments and ideas to leverage digital for the financing of the SDGs that I think we should really look forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Boutheina, what's next on the World Bank to-do list on this?
Thank you. So I think what's next is moving the discussion from emergency responses to building resilient future, and having clearly digital as part of the thinking process. And the way we're thinking about it is to continue pushing on the digital as a sector. So this is the whole connectivity agenda, the public good linked to data, but also taking this as a key ingredient for how the other sectors are thinking about resilience recovery. So we're having a dual approach, moving very fast into the lending pipeline on digital transformation, and also working very, very closely with other colleagues that are sectoral colleagues to try to see how much digital can be used. And of course, the pandemic showed the importance of this. I think one example that comes to mind is what happened on the education sector. I mean, the world became virtual overnight. An incredible response from countries, regardless of their level of development in terms of thinking about digital. And what we've seen, it takes more than just connecting schools. So I think I want to pick on the point that mentioned earlier about digital capabilities. We think about it as a core foundation of how we use digital more. And another point that I want to mention is to find more approaches and more opportunities where together we think about this. So the partnership agenda is very high in the bank approach of how we think about digital in the post-COVID era. And great examples from everybody so far. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you so much. Sylvestre, can I hear from you?
Yeah, building again on digital agriculture, and as I said, we have all the tool now in the toolbox to de-risk farming, and that's really the essence of what we want to do with digital farming. De-risk the business for farmers, which means a better access to credit. So credit is a key enabler. We are asking here to talk about challenges. So access to credit for farmers is essential to kick off their business and build those ecosystems, because we are not going to achieve that in isolation, and we still have a lot of silo mentality when we approach smallholder farmers in emerging countries. So building this ecosystem, access to funding, and last but not least is also the training, the capacity building. We may have all the beautiful tools, but we need to still train people at ground level. And here again, digital can play an enormous role with MOOC, with augmented reality. Think about how to train a drone pilot. We have augmented reality now available to train people on how to use drones. So it's about putting all those pieces together and piloting small. Small is beautiful when we start to pilot in emerging countries and not necessarily the immediate bigger picture. So that's the essence of the challenges we are facing around digital agriculture in emerging countries.
Thank you so much. Bernhard, more on regional agriculture, on digital agriculture?
I mean, I really have to say, like a lot of the comments that were made before, I have to fully second. Also the one that Boutheina made on like partnerships. I really believe that, you know, no single organization nor company can really solve like the world's problems. So like we need to have smarter ways of how to work together, how to partner, how to collaborate, even if it's not formal partnership. So that's definitely one area. There's another one that from our perspective is actually about what Brigitte was saying about, like, you know, data analytics, data responsibility. Like people would say, well, you know, why would the World Food Program need to be like the best in data usage? And shouldn't that be Google in this case, or Microsoft, or somebody else? But I would argue the other way around, where it's like, okay, we are trying to serve the people, most vulnerable people globally, so we need to be the best and at the forefront to actually serve them best. And just lastly, like I think when it comes to like the financing gap, and like this is where I think some of the comments before come together, is just think about, okay, a lot of times we're talking about like cost of technology, but rather look at this as an investment, where if you say, like, for instance, building blocks, our blockchain solution for cash transfers is already used by 600,000 people in Jordan and Bangladesh, where we save 98% of the banking fees right now, which is definitely, that's, you know, money you save, you can reinvest into actually providing food to people. We've supported eShop, which is kind of a delivery hero in Somalia, where we build up essentially like delivery hero in Somalia, socially distant, like delivering food. There's a transport sector that has a sustainable business. 90,000 people use it, and we even save money doing that. And there's a couple of other examples, like, you know, digitizing a bill of lading, shipping documents on cross-border transfers. We know how inefficient like some of these like supply chain routes can be, and just we know that from a humanitarian perspective. Just think about, for the whole business environment, how much money you could actually save, the efficiencies to gain that you could reinvest into actually funding some of those projects.
Thank you so much. Irene, can we go back to how difficult it is to bring this type of digital innovation to the SMEs, and what are you guys proactively doing? And we close with you.
Thank you. I put some thoughts in the chat in case the time was too short, but I say we're super happy to see, I have to say, an unprecedented level of collaboration. And I think because innovation is intrinsically a collaborative effort, it goes very naturally in the models that we're building, but it's quite positively surprising to see it coming from so many corporates like Bayer, from all of the IFIs. And so I put an example of how that can help us share regional public goods. And I put an example on the chat. Second, it's on accelerating mobilization. We just had a call recently with John at DFC, because if we want to achieve this moonshot, for example, that I mentioned for lack in venture investing, definitely requires many of us. And thirdly, I think on shared models, and models that help us set the solid foundation of the society we want to see in these emerging economies and in these countries. One where, you know, we get the right balance in terms of data privacy and so forth. So I think those of us here, I think we do share some of these principles and follow development digital principles in what we build. So having the opportunity to share these models, we're doing it with the World Food Program, for example, through an informal network called Moonshots for Development that we created precisely to exchange across innovation labs of IFIs these type of models. So thank you, and look forward to engaging more with you.
Thank you so much. I also want to thank everybody. This has been a very interesting conversation for me. And thank you so much for your time and for your input. And Matt, almost on time.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much. We like to start on time. We like to end on time. But here's the key for this. And I have to say, when Hannah and I were coming into this morning, we really wanted to see if this was a model that would work, something we could easily replicate, embracing digital as something to bring people together, that collaborative model. And we feel great about this. So we hope this is the first of many. And Laura, thank you so much. And to KPMG for all of your support and collaboration with Concordia. So thank you to everybody joining this morning, and looking forward to more conversations to come.